Imagine if this happened. The doors close. The room goes quiet. Anne opens a blue folder and slides it slowly across the table. Catherine doesn't reach for it. She already knows something is coming. William goes rigid. Charles doesn't look up. Camilla sits across from a woman who has finally heard every single word said about her behind her back. What comes next doesn't just expose a private grudge. It dismantles a lie the palace has quietly protected for months. The tension that quietly built, while the world watched. Tension had been building long before anyone imagined a meeting at Windsor. In this fictional story, Catherine's cancer diagnosis in January 2024 changed everything. She stepped back from public life to undergo treatment while caring for her 3 children. Meanwhile, the palace managed media coverage. When she finally returned to the spotlight, the public response was overwhelming. People cried when she appeared at Trooping the Color in June 2024. Cameras couldn't find anyone who wasn't captivated by her presence. Commentators quickly compared her to Diana. This comparison was something the palace wanted to avoid. A YouGov poll from April 2026 showed Diana with a 77% favorability rating among British adults, while Catherine had 75%. In the public's eyes, their numbers echoed each other. After Catherine's return, her public appearances felt more significant. Every smile seemed hard-earned, and every wave felt meaningful. Families gathered not just to see the Princess of Wales, but to see a woman who had overcome real challenges. In this story, this change began to upset the established balance. The concerns didn't start loudly, they arose quietly within palace conversations. A wayward comment here, a scheduling worry there, hinted at something deeper. Camilla had worked hard over the years to gain her position. The public accepted her as queen consort. She stood beside Charles, carried out engagements, and delivered speeches. However, acceptance does not equal love. In this imagined scenario, the difference began to matter. Royal author Christopher Anderson pointed out that tensions were rising as Charles and William's courts competed for public affection. OK Magazine insiders reported in October 2025 that the relationship between Camilla and Catherine was icy and nearly impossible to manage. An insider described their dynamic as the fiercest clash between 2 senior royal women in years. In our story, a word began to circulate quietly behind closed doors: sympathy. Catherine had earned it the hardest way, through illness, resilience, and her choice to show her vulnerability before displaying her strength. This kind of credibility can't be faked. It also can't be easily controlled. So, the unspoken question emerged. What happens when the future feels brighter than the present? What occurs when someone who hasn't yet taken the throne garners more warmth than the institution around her? No one asked this directly, but the answer became clear in scheduling documents and briefing notes. Catherine's speaking time at one event was cut without explanation. Her placement beside Charles at another was changed without discussion. A drafted message referred to her simply as a senior member of the royal family, not the future queen. Each change seemed minor on its own, but together they told a bigger story. Catherine accepted all the adjustments because she had always been patient with the institution. She understood the palace moved slowly and that decisions often lacked context. What she didn't know was that someone was paying attention, not to the changes themselves, but to who was making them. Anne watches, waits, and collects. What no one will say. In 2024, Princess Anne completed 474 official royal engagements, more than any other working royal. This was despite being hospitalized for a horse-related injury at Gatcombe Park. She has been the hardest working royal for 4 years in a row. Anne doesn't announce her achievements or seek attention. She shows up. This discipline creates a unique perception. In our fictional story, Anne had been observing her surroundings for weeks before taking action. She noticed actual concerns, not rumors or casual gossip. The first concern came from an aide who mentioned a quiet conversation about balancing public attention among the royal households. The use of the word balance seemed too deliberate to Anne. She took note but didn't say anything. The second concern came during a private lunch. A household assistant expressed concerns about Catherine's growing public presence, not about her health or recovery. The concern was expressed clearly, with a focus on the monarchy's hierarchy of visibility. Anne asked one question. Was this about Catherine's workload? The answer was no. Was it about her calendar? Still no. Then what? The assistant paused and said one word: influence. Anne set down her cup. She chose not to press for more information, at least not yet. In this imagined scenario, Anne began to piece together what she had learned. She compared her observations with Catherine's recent schedule. She noted that a speech was unexpectedly cut short at a formal event. There was a photo arrangement that placed Catherine farther from the king than usual. A briefing note had even dropped the words, "Future Queen," from a paragraph where they had previously appeared without issue. None of these changes were visible to the public. Each change was intentional. Anne did not act hastily. She understood that raising concerns too early could lead to rumors, which then result in denials. Denials protect those who should be questioned. So, she waited for a third account. This account came from a staff member involved in planning engagements. This person revealed that guidance had come in saying Catherine should not always appear next to Charles and that this should be reviewed. The palace wanted to carefully manage who the cameras followed and how much influence the Wales household had on the narrative. At that point, Anne realized that what she was hearing was significant, not just palace noise. She recognized that an unsettling shift was occurring. It was not a well-planned campaign with meetings and strategy documents. Instead, it was a quiet drift shaped by private feelings, lacking clear ownership. She gathered her findings. She examined briefing documents she could access and discovered a troubling phrase buried at the bottom of a planning note: "Control the public sympathies." This phrase had no author attached and followed a section about managing the Wales household's visibility. In our fictional telling, Anne read this phrase twice. She folded the document, placed it in a blue folder, and made a decision. She would not go to the press or alert Catherine's office through channels that could be intercepted. She would not leave quiet observations to be ignored. Instead, she would confront the issue in a meeting where everyone would have to listen. The private warning that Camilla chose to ignore. Before Anne called any meetings, she took an unusual step that few knew about. She quietly warned Camilla. This wasn't a formal complaint sent through secretaries. It was a simple, private conversation after a planning session when everyone else had left. Just two women who had spent years in a slow-moving and protective institution. In this version, Anne spoke softly, as she always does. She straightforwardly shared her findings. People were questioning Catherine's suitability for her future role. This wasn't about her schedule or recovery timeline, but about her character and whether she was capable of the challenges ahead. Camilla, in this fictional scenario, remained composed. She explained that there had been talks about the pressure Catherine faced and what a full return would require. Concern for Catherine stemmed from care, she said. Anne listened without interruption. Then she asked one question. Was it care that led people to label Catherine as too fragile for the future? The silence that followed spoke volumes. In our imagined story, Camilla quickly recovered. She mentioned that words changed as they moved through the palace. What began as concern could become something else after just a few retellings. Anne acknowledged this. Then she said firmly that Catherine's health should not be seen as a sign of weakness, nor should Diana's memory be used to undermine Catherine. Decisions about the Wales household should not be influenced by private comments that Catherine couldn't hear or respond to. In this version, Camilla didn't apologize. She stood her ground. She argued that Anne was too close to the situation. Institutional loyalty required a broader perspective than personal feelings. Popularity did not equal readiness. Public sympathy could be powerful, but it wouldn't dictate the monarchy's direction. Anne looked at her without moving. She replied that Camilla's view was an institutional way of addressing something personal. The room remained silent. Camilla left. Catherine's office received no apology. There were no corrections to the briefing notes or guidance for scheduling staff. Everything continued as if Anne's warning had never been shared. Then Anne heard something else. In this fictional tale, a staff member overheard part of another conversation days later. Camilla reportedly said that Anne's involvement had made no difference. Catherine's role still needed careful management as William took on more responsibilities. Anne had sped up a conversation the palace would have had eventually. There was one last sentence. The staff member paused before repeating it. Diana was involved. This implied that Catherine's connection to the public was not entirely her own. She enjoyed the support born from memories of Diana. The public's ongoing grief for Diana had shifted to Catherine. When the palace decided to address this imbalance, public sentiment toward Catherine might prove borrowed rather than earned. Anne understood this. She saw that private intervention had ended. It was time to take action. Hello, viewers. In this imagined scenario, was Anne right to bring her observations to that room? Leave a yes or no in the comments. If you believe Catherine deserved to know the truth, show it by liking, sharing, and subscribing to this channel. A community that refuses to look away cannot be controlled quietly. Now things are about to change. The blue folder opens and the room changes forever. The meeting was set up without any fuss. In this fictional story, the agenda seemed normal. It covered upcoming events, public messages, and the role of royalty during a time when the institution needed to seem strong and united. No one who received the agenda suspected anything unusual. Catherine sat beside William. Charles sat at the center of the table. Camilla already had a folder open. Anne came in with no papers and placed a blue folder next to her before everyone was seated. The secretary read through the scheduled items, dates, duties, and ceremonial notes. The language was formal, creating an orderly atmosphere. Then the secretary left. In our fictional account, Anne didn't wait long after the door closed. She interrupted before Charles could move to the next item. She said Catherine needed to hear something. William shifted in his seat. Camilla remained expressionless. Charles looked at Anne with the calmness of someone used to sensing when tension might arise. Anne began with the easiest point. Concerns had been raised about Catherine getting too much attention in public coverage. This wasn't a one-time issue. It was a repeated concern among people who discussed it when Catherine was not present. Catherine responded softly that she never sought extra attention. Anne acknowledged this, but said the real issue wasn't attention, it was influence. In this fictional scenario, she opened her folder and placed a document on the table. It wasn't an accusation or complaint, it was a planning document. It was internal and written in the polite language often used by palace administration to make difficult points without being confrontational. However, when read clearly, the document revealed everything. It discussed plans to review Catherine's role at upcoming state events and suggested reducing mentions of the future succession in communications about the current reign. It included a phrase that had appeared in the private remarks Anne had carefully gathered over several weeks. William asked who had written it, but nobody replied. Camilla explained that planning documents pass through many hands, and unclear language in a draft shouldn't be seen as a personal attack. Anne was not done. She shared what the document didn't clearly state. The private language used in various conversations, all leading to the same points made by different staff members at different times. They viewed Catherine as too fragile, too protected by public support, and too prominent before the timing was right. Charles turned to Camilla and asked directly whether those were her words. Camilla didn't deny it. She explained that her observation concerned external pressure, not Catherine herself. She claimed the public's sympathy for Catherine's illness had created an imbalance, and recognizing that imbalance was responsible governance, not hostility. William's tone changed. It grew quieter as he asked how long this had been happening. Anne's two-word answer changed the mood in the room. There was a pattern. This response affected the room more than any confrontation. A pattern meant the changes weren't isolated incidents. They were planned and based on a reasoning that stemmed from doubts about Catherine's position. Charles closed the folder in front of him without looking at Camilla. In our fictional story, the worst was yet to come. Diana's shadow falls and Catherine finally breaks. Many people have compared Catherine to Diana since she became part of the royal family. Catherine wears Diana's engagement ring and has her title. She visits the same places, attends many of the same events, and attracts crowds who remember Diana, a beloved figure lost before the turn of the century. YouGov polling from April 2026 shows that Diana has a favorability rating of 77%, while Catherine's is at 75%. These close numbers suggest that the public sees them as connected. Royal biographer Robert Jobson mentioned in 2024 that Catherine was hesitant to take on the Princess of Wales title because it carries a lot of weight from Diana's legacy. A former aide said Catherine wanted to create her own identity rather than be defined by the comparison. For over 10 years, she had managed to do this. However, our fictional story takes a turn when Anne shares something she heard after a private warning. A staff member hesitated before saying one last sentence, hinting that Catherine's popularity might not be entirely her own. The suggestion was that the affection people felt for her stemmed from their unresolved grief over Diana. The implication was that, as long as the palace decided when to address this, the public's feelings toward Catherine could be perceived differently. One word stood out in this moment: borrowed. It felt heavy in the room. Catherine remained still. Her posture and expression had been calm throughout the meeting, even during tense discussions. But this was different. She had dealt with comparisons to Diana for years, hearing it from journalists and strangers alike. She worked hard to develop her identity within that shadow. What shook her composure was the idea that the love people felt for her did not originate from her, but came from their memories of Diana. For a brief moment, a tear slipped down her cheek. She quietly brought her hand to her mouth, managing a moment that could have overwhelmed her. William leaned in slightly, saying nothing. He didn't need to. In this fictional story, something shifted in the room, not just the conversation. A part of Catherine that required her to accept everything without questioning quietly was over. When she lowered her hand and looked up, it was clear that something had changed in her. Catherine stands, speaks, and refuses to shrink again. For a moment, the room was silent. In this story, Charles was trying to resolve. Meetings like this usually ended with some agreement, no matter what had been said. They talked about moving forward, taking concerns seriously, and ensuring open communication among senior members. Catherine spoke first. She didn't raise her voice. She had learned that staying calm was important and helped her be taken seriously by people who confused loudness with strength and quietness with agreement. She kept calm, but she did not stay silent. She turned to Camilla and said that if there were real concerns about her ability to perform her duties, those concerns should go through proper channels: her office, her husband, or the king when needed, not through invisible scheduling changes or whispers in corridors where they could be denied. Then she said something more. She said that presenting personal opinions as protective measures was not real protection. It was management. Whatever was said about Diana's memory, the 3 children she raised, her work, and her battle with illness belonged to Diana alone. Camilla tried to respond, but Catherine continued. She stated that any questions about her role, position, or public engagements should be addressed directly to her from now on, rather than being sidestepped or filtered before reaching the king, and not wrapped in language that avoids challenging anyone. William was already standing. Charles picked up the blue folder and looked at the last page. It held the schedule for an upcoming state event. He read it once, then he read it again. In this story, he closed it and announced that the plan would not go ahead. More importantly, he said that any changes to Catherine's ceremonial role, public appearances, or placements needed to be discussed with the Wales household. No secret changes. No last-minute adjustments without explanation. If changes were to be made to Catherine's duties, those discussions would take place in her presence. Camilla said nothing. The meeting ended. In this imagined scene, as William and Catherine walked toward the door, Catherine looked back once. She didn't look at Camilla. Instead, she looked at Anne. There was no emotional display, no hug, just a brief nod between 2 people who understood the difficulty and importance of what had just happened. Anne replied with the slightest nod. And that was everything. In this fictional story, the palace did not fall apart after that day. The public saw nothing out of the ordinary. Pictures from later events showed the royal family together, composed, and fulfilling their duties, as always. But something changed behind those images. Catherine now understood the source of the pressure. She knew which decisions needed more attention. She also realized that while patience and calm were still her tools, they were no longer her only options. And she realized that when the room had felt small enough to swallow her whole, someone had turned on the light. That person didn't seek credit. They did what was needed. If this story moved you, if you felt something from Anne's quiet bravery, Catherine's calm under pressure, and the truth finally being brought to light instead of hidden away, share your thoughts below like this video. Share it with other royal fans. Subscribe to stay tuned for the next chapter, where a new seating arrangement moves Catherine away from William, and a royal decision changes everything we thought we knew.